The boys are back in town. Okay, shit, we're live. What's up, everybody? How are you doing? It's me today. I'm back. You see me, I'm on camera and everything. We've got Dankey with us today. I'm delighted. I'm so excited to have DK back with us. Back in 2020, when I first started streaming, DK was one of the first people that I had on the channel, so I'm really pumped, really hyped up that Dankey's here joining us again today for the rebooting and reconstituting of Marxism Today, and also Dankey's channel as well. Dankey, you want to introduce yourself to everybody, or reintroduce yourself as it might be?
Yeah, hello everyone. It's me, Dankey Kang, your favorite Donkey Kong themed communist YouTuber, back from the dead. And I have recently converted over to Marxism-Leninism-Maoism. So I am here to stream with comrade Paul, and we're going to talk about that.
You know, I saw that, and when I saw you release that video talking about how you'd moved over to MLM, I became that meme, you know, where the guy just, you know, he looks at the camera. It's this old, haggard, bearded guy, and he looks at the camera, and he's out in the woods, and he just looks at the camera, and, you know, you see he slowly starts to nod, and the smile creeps onto his face.
Yeah. Yeah,
I became.
I was so nervous to drop that video, honestly, because I didn't know how my subscribers were going to react to it. I was like, oh boy, I'm going to lose all my subs. Everyone's going to be shit talking me. It's not going to be good. But, you know,
I've been
I
there.
have received a pretty warm welcome so far. You know, I think before I dropped my first Essentials of Maoism video, I gave a little word of warning to my subscribers, and I basically said, look, this is where it's at now. I'm a Marxist-Leninist Maoist, but I'm not going to claim that I am enlightened now and that I know everything about everything, and I certainly am not setting out to cancel all Marxist-Leninists out there and say, you know, you should disregard them. And so and you know, in the same manner that I say you shouldn't characterize all Marxist-Leninists based on, you know, some of the weird edgelords and shit posters that you'll find on Twitter, you know, you shouldn't categorize all Maoists based off of, you know, some of the more, I guess we should say, eccentric posters that we encounter on the internet.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, look, there's weirdos. There are definitely fucking weird. I mean, probably me, chief among them. You know? But there definitely are weird. And there's like 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds who get onto Twitter and they start saying the wildest shit. And that's true for literally every ideology. You know, everything. Whether you're a fucking social democrat, or, you know, you're a Marxist, MLM, doesn't matter what you are. You're gonna find some weirdos who are just gonna say some really insane shit, and people can then use that against the entire ideology itself, and unfortunately just use it to write off everything. You always see this as well. You always see people poking fun at anarchists for this. They'll find something that like a 10-year-old anarchist said, you know, about their parents or something, and then everyone's like, anarchitties, most sophisticated anarchitty. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
That's not engaging in good faith at all. Fuck that.
I know the whole like bedtime discourse on Twitter got pretty toxic very quickly. There was this whole
Yeah.
notion that like anarchists were against bedtime. They wanted to abolish bedtime, and that became sort of a meme. And look, I mean, I think we shouldn't classify all of these different left tendencies based off of posts made by 10-year-olds on Twitter. You know, call me crazy, but I think that, you know, all of these ideas deserve a little bit more at least courtesy in investigating them than just
Yeah.
pointing to, you know, all of these really eccentric personalities on the internet and saying, there, that proves that, you know, Marxism or Maoism or Trotskyism or whatever is defunct because, you know, Dragon Lord 420 on Twitter said that, you know, said this or that. And I think in my personal experience with Maoism, that was really what initially turned me off from Maoism for the longest
Mm,
time, is that you would just encounter these very eccentric edgelord sort of hyper online, hyper particularist personalities, and people would say this is emblematic of the entire tendency. And it was only by deeply diving into what Maoist actually had to say about Maoism, rather than these sort of caricatures that you encounter either from other Marxist-Leninist impressions or just from these, very brief online interactions with people. Um, and oftentimes these online interactions occur in an echo chamber, and so this really isn't sort of a collective realization or collective development or recognition of Maoism. It's more so just an individualist take of this hyper particularist Maoist tendency that you'll encounter sometimes on the internet.
Mm. Yeah, and it just pays no attention to the real Maoist spectrum that exists there. There are many different tendencies, many different strains and strands within Marxism, Leninism, Maoism internationally. And there's an important conversation to be had there about the different lines that exist. But you're not hearing that, from 10-year-olds on Twitter. And by the way, no harm, no I'm not shaming 10-year-olds on Twitter. We've all been 10 years old and said dumb shit. But as I say, no investigation, no right to speak. We just have to study deeper and engage in concrete analyses of concrete situations. And don't judge ideologies based on what you saw some dumbass on the internet saying. Myself, chief among them.
Yeah. And I think another important thing to note is that, especially in the West, we're often taught about communism, about Marxism, as a sort of monolithic entity. And so I think the default reaction for a lot of Western Marxists when they start looking into this thing is to look at their ideology as a sort of team that they need to root for, regardless of line, regardless of theoretical framework. And so they will find themselves sort of just wanting to join one team or the other. So you're either team ML or you're team MLM or you're team Trotsky. And so you encounter a lot of people who will simply pick a team and defend that without any sort of investigation or critique. And I think the objective out there should be to keep seeking to educate yourself, keep seeking to improve yourself, because we are all at a stage where we can be improving our own education in the revolutionary science. And of course, I think that settling on Marxism-Leninism-Maoism is a safe bet. And through my education, that is where I settled. And I think that through honest investigation and honest education, with the objective being to maintain that sort of revolutionary core of Marxism, I feel like that's where most people who honestly investigate that will wind up settling. But it's not going to happen if people aren't willing to communicate Marxism-Leninism-Maoism in a way that can reach a wider audience and not just cater to this hyper-particularist, almost permanently online tendency.
Yeah, hard agree on that. All right, I am conscious that we set a bunch of questions to discuss throughout this, and we haven't dived into them at all. We just jumped right into the conversation about Maoism, which is cool. I want to give a little shout out and just say hello to everybody in the chat. I hope you're all keeping well. Thanks very much for being with us here today. I see Sazi, Fitri, Marxist-Leninist Chavista, Beardington, Despa, Y, Ruben, a number of great comrades, the Tiny Gangsta, Star, I think there's a star there. How he's getting on? Red salute. Hope he's all keeping well. I've got a coffee here beside me today because, well, it's been about a year, maybe 2 years since I've streamed on this channel, and about a year since I streamed on the other channel, which is now left on replay. And I had a little bit of jitters, a little bit of pre-stream jitters, a little bit nervous, and I just thought, why don't I just drink a load of coffee and get a load of caffeine into me, and then that sense of being nervous that I had before will seem very relaxed by comparison, and I'll appreciate. I'll only then truly appreciate it. And so now I'm drinking coffee and getting caffeinated, and trying to pump up the nerves a little bit. And so if you see me falling over my words a little bit, blame it on the caffeine from now on. I should not have drank this, but here we are. And it's better than vodka as well. Setting less of a bad example than the old vodcasts. Not to say I'm ruling those out. Listen, Dankey, we have you back. I'm delighted to have you back. This is brilliant. Where the feck have you been these past few years? Please tell the good people where you've been, because these last 2 years, 3 years, however long it's been since you've been gone, opportunists have been running amok. You know, you've got these all of these riding with Bidenists, these libs. You've got all these patsocks, these Nazi patsocks, and it's just been ridiculous the last couple of years. So I'm delighted to see that you're coming back, and I'm also delighted to see that there's a number of other great new channels rising at the moment. You know, Socialism for All, a really principled channel. Coming from an anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist perspective rather than particularly a Marxist-Leninist-Maoist perspective, but you're still getting some pretty good analyses pretty regularly as well. There's a load of great channels, and we might get into that a little bit more later. I might even do a separate video on that at some stage. But where have you been? What's happened? Give us the bring us up to date.
So I've been on a bit of a hiatus, and there's just been some events in my personal life that has caused me to sort of fall off the wagon, as it were. I've been struggling with my mental health. I've been struggling with life circumstances, and right now I feel like I'm in a place where I wanted to get back on YouTube. I wanted to get again. And during that time when I was in hiatus, I did quite a bit of soul searching. And like you, I was sort of witnessing this horrible emergence of opportunism on the internet. And it was a shit show. I was watching it all from the sidelines, just sort of cringing and saying, oh my God, what are these people doing? And, you know, there are, just like in real life, there are periods of revisionist stagnation and there are periods of revolutionary advance. And I feel like we're starting to sort of come out of this this revisionist stagnation period, and we're entering into a period of revolutionary advance on YouTube. We're seeing the emergence of YouTubers now who are finally, you know, coming out and fighting against these tendencies, whether it's liberal opportunism or right-wing opportunism, conservative opportunism. And so it's great to see a number of principled Marxist YouTubers emerge from the muck of this revisionist cesspool that we are immersed in currently.
Yeah, it really is. There's been a couple of suggestions there as well in the chat. I see Chemical Minds, criminally underrated. I haven't actually checked out Chemical Mind, so I can't give a full endorsement just there, but apparently that's someone to check out. Apparently an optimistic comrade. But yeah, it's great to see so many people identifying the opportunism that exists and moving beyond it and using that as a jumping off point, you know, to get to a higher and more advanced stage within our development, you know. And speaking of getting to a higher stage of development, you yourself have developed quite a lot politically over the years. So, you know, could you please tell us a little bit about how you went from being a Marxist-Leninist to a Marxist-Leninist-Maoist at this stage, or identifying with studying Marxism-Leninism-Maoism at this stage? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was a Marxist-Leninist for a great many of years, and upon my exchanges with Marxist-Leninists about Maoism, Maoism was often just sort of disregarded and treated with just this sort of like condescending attitude of like, oh, these Maoists, they're just crazy, they're ultra, they're adventurous, they're LARPers, they're violent, religious dogmatists.
Cultists, yeah.
And yeah, but when you actually look at what Maoists have to say about Marxism-Leninism-Maoism, they will say it's a third and higher stage of Marxism. So, you know, I'm a gamer. I want to be playing the latest patch. And so, you know, and similar to that, I want to be on the latest patch of Marxism. Okay, I want to be part of the third and highest stage if it is truly a third and higher stage. So I didn't set out to become a Maoist. I set out to investigate why specifically Maoists say they are a third and higher stage of Marxism. You know, and so I wanted to actually see what Maoist had to say about Maoism rather than see what Marxist-Leninist had to say about Maoism. And I feel like going about that in a principled, constructive way, not really setting out to be a Maoist necessarily, but just setting out to understand it. And it was through investigating and coming to understand Maoism that I began to say, you know what? I think this actually does make sense. I think that you can make an argument that Maoism is a third and higher stage of Marxism. And so I sort of had an existential crisis, and I was like, well,
Yep.
damn, I guess I'm a Maoist. And the more I read, the more I started to realize it's like, you know what? All this, Deng Xiaoping thought and modern revisionist Marxism-Leninism is just an intellectual dead end. It's a theoretical dead end. And it leads into campism, like how you so succinctly described in your video. And so seeking to reject the sort of campist ideology, the sort of campist tendency here, I seek truth from facts, and I try to seek the reality of the situation, and rather than assign myself or confine myself to one tendency that may not necessarily continue the revolutionary trajectory of Marxism, is just not for me. I've always wanted to believe in a higher stage, and at the time, before I started this investigation, I thought Marxism-Leninism was the answer. And I'm not saying that Marxism-Leninism should be completely thrown in the bin necessarily, and that Marxist-Leninists have nothing whatsoever to offer the movement anymore. But I'm saying to people who feel like Maoism has nothing to offer, to at least do it the courtesy of looking into it. Don't just take what these hyper particularist online tendencies have to say and leave it at that, but actually investigate what Maoists have to say in their own literature, and don't just look to academics. Don't just look towards don't even look to people like me. Look to people like the Communist Party of the Philippines. Look to people like the Communist Party of India Maoists, people who are actually out there immersed in the class struggle and advancing this revolutionary theory.
Hard agree, yeah. Theory comes from practice, and the people who are engaged at the highest level of practice today are the Maoists. And I think that that's a turning point for a lot of people when they realize that the people who are actually engaged in class struggle, revolutionary class struggle, they are Marxist, Leninist, Maoists in India and the Philippines and so on. And of course, this isn't to shit on Marxism-Leninism at all. We are Marxist-Leninists in the same way that Marxist-Leninists are Marxists, Marxist-Leninist-Maoists are Marxist-Leninists. We're still there. There is still that continuity, but there are ruptures from, let's say, the elements within the Marxist-Leninist movement that were leading people down dead ends, like Euro-communism and rightist tendencies, Dengist kind of thought, Deng Xiaoping theory, all this kind of stuff. It's not really getting people anywhere. It's not advancing class struggle, which I think is really, really important. And a lot of people end up falling into basically national struggle rather than class struggle. And, at that point, you basically abandoned historical materialism. Historical materialism holds that class struggle is the driving force of history. Where do we see the class struggle? We see it in India and we see it in the Philippines. That's not to say there aren't other manifestations of class struggle that exist elsewhere in the world. Of course there are. There are pockets of it absolutely everywhere in every country. It's not just the countries that we see as that are seen as actually existing socialist countries, but in every single country there are elements of class struggle. But the highest level of class struggle, engaging in revolutionary class struggle, that's happening in the Philippines and India. And I think that that's really, really important, And as you said, I think it's just so important to understand what people mean when we say that Marxism-Leninism-Maoism is a higher stage, and not getting caught up in the weeds of whatever you heard some 10-year-old on Twitter say, No, what we're saying is that Marxism-Leninism-Maoism just fundamentally develops Marxism's core components to a higher stage. The three core components that we would refer to generally would be the philosophy, dialectics, the law of contradiction, the Marxist theory of knowledge, and so on, political economy, and we get this through like bureaucrat capitalism, new democracy, struggling at the superstructure, as well as the base in the socialist transition periods. And then, of course, just in terms of scientific socialism, elevated to a higher level with class struggle via people's war, cultural revolution to transition from lower to higher stages of socialist society under dictatorship of the proletariat. And there's so much there. There's such a rich vast wealth of knowledge, of theory and practice that can be studied, and that really offers people a way out of the quagmires that they find themselves in. A lot of people are in Marxist-Leninist organizations and they just feel like, I'm not getting anywhere. This isn't actually, I've been in this party or this organization for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and we're not really getting anywhere. What's the issue here? What's going on? This gives you the tools to overcome those issues and to progress the class struggle, you know. And there's a massive toolbox there, you know, in terms of Maoism that you just really don't get when it comes with Marxism-Leninism. Or you might get lip service to, but you don't get the full thing. Things like, for example, we said the theory of contradiction, understanding primary and secondary contradictions, understanding antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradictions, understanding the theory of knowledge, you know, how we get from perceptual knowledge to conceptual knowledge, back to perceptual knowledge over and over again. The theory of new democracy for those bureaucratic capitalist semi-colonial societies and generally semi-feudal societies as well. You get the mass line, you know, from the masses to the masses, as we say. You get your three instruments of the revolution, you know, you get the infrastructure, how to actually wage revolution, you know, with the party, the People's Army and the United Front. You get, of course, you get People's War, and there are different manifestations of that, of course. You've got the October Road, and then you've got Maoist protracted People's War, depending on the particular conditions you find yourself in. In organizations, you get two-line struggle, really important, being able to delineate, you know, we know one divides into two. In every organization, there's going to be a left and a right, and understanding which is going to take you on the revolutionary path and which is going to take you on the path back towards capitalism, capitulation, and all of these things. You get cultural revolution, understanding the need for struggle at the superstructure. And of course, really importantly, you get crit, self-crit. I think that that's so important. Rectification campaigns emerging from it as well. And I think it was just, maybe it was last night, there was a thing on Twitter, and a comrade, I'm not going to mention who, but a comrade was really struggling with accepting criticism, a legitimate criticism, a fair criticism. And they just didn't really understand how to accept the criticism. They were getting extremely defensive and they were just going through a tough time with it, you know. If you have the dialectical materialist theory of knowledge, then you know how to engage in constructive criticism, not destructive criticism, constructive criticism. You know how to work through the different stages. You know how to work through the observation, the emotion, the action want, and the purpose. You know, we say this is a dialectical materialist method, because really, you're starting with the material, something you've observed that's wrong, yeah, the observation. Then you're moving to the emotion that it made you feel, so you're going to the ideal, yeah. And then you're saying, this is the action want, this is what I want you to do to rectify this issue, you know, returning back to the material. And then you're saying, look, here's the purpose of this criticism, here's the purpose of this action want and this rectification, and how what you do to rectify the issue is going to benefit our class, getting us closer towards the class struggle, towards advancing the class struggle, you know. And these kinds of analyses, I just don't see them when it comes to more vague Marxist movements, more vague Marxist-Leninist movements. I don't see them actually applying dialectical materialism in the way that's needed to advance class struggle like that. Do you know what I mean? I think it's just really, really important that we're able to apply these. We've got this massive toolbox. How do we actually use the tools? You know, do you know what I mean?
Right. And I think that this is something that everyone contends with. And a lot of people, especially, you know, you notice online, they stop at the emotion phase. You know, they observe and then they provide their emotion and they just sort of leave it at that. And that's sort of like throwing up the table at a party, you know, spilling the confetti and the cake everywhere and then walking away. And it's like, no, you have to offer and you have to afford people a bit of courtesy. You have to say, okay, I'm not just going to completely call you a traitor to the revolution, a revisionist dog, and you are hereby canceled forever, and you know,
Yeah.
send them to the gulag, as it were. You have to, you know, be willing to say to people, look, here is you know, this sort of line that you're putting out. Here's why I think it's incorrect, and here's what I want you to acknowledge and do to rectify this. And you can do that in a way that's not combative. You can do that in a way that's constructive. But I feel like, especially in the sort of debate bro, clout chasing sort of culture that you find yourself online, there's a lot of people out there who just seek to tear people down.
Yeah, big time.
And don't get me wrong, there are some people out there who definitely will be torn down and deserve to be torn down, but it's because they have the same kind of approach. They are just out there to tear people down, to chase clout, to seek to, give fame to their own name and get subscribers and get followers and what have you. And it's like that's not why I'm out here on the internet. I would be saying the same thing if I had 100,000 subscribers or 10 subscribers.
Mm.
But all that is to say, please still stay subscribed to me.
There's a link, by the way. Everybody here, just please go subscribe to Dankey's channel. He's rebooting it. There's a new series coming out. I'm really excited about that. So just subscribe right now. Stop whatever you're doing right now, watching this. Don't stop watching this. Open it up in a new tab. Subscribe.
If you go and check out my older videos, just know that that is the old Dankey, and I'm still leaving those videos up just for posterity, just so that folks can see where I came from and where I am now. And so my hiatus and my return sort of marks the end of the old Dankey and the beginning of the new Dankey. But I don't want to discourage people and say, oh, well, Dankey's just getting super duper serious now. And so there's not going to be any more fun posts anymore. It's all just going to be, the essentials of Maoism and nothing else. I mean, my new series is something very important to me because Marxism-Leninism and Marxism-Leninism-Maoism is very important to me. And so I want to treat these topics with the seriousness that they deserve. But I do think that there is room for levity. I do think that there is room to be able to communicate with a sort of flowing humor that rather than overshadows the sort of topics that you're discussing, just provides that sort of sense of levity, sense of casual conversation to the presentation. And I think that Paul does a great job doing that as well, because I've gotten some genuine laughs out of some of your videos as well. And I think that there's a balance. I think that there is a fine balance. It can't just be all memes and goofs, but at the same time, people who take themselves way too seriously often find that they alienate the sort of mass audiences that they're trying to reach with their content.
Definitely. My big issue is that I love dad jokes. I've got such a shit sense of humor. I do dad jokes, and I do like deadpan humor, which people usually just don't get, and so I just don't get laughs. So I just don't even bother trying anymore. I'm just like, okay, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep it serious. I tried to make the left on replay videos a little bit more interesting and exciting and a little bit more engaging, but in terms of like the socialism 101 stuff on this channel, I've just thrown in the towel. I'm just like, fuck it, we're just going to keep it as academic as whatever. We're just going to get out the information that people need. I'm not going to try to get any laughs. I'll end up cringing too much when I'm editing the video, and I'll never be able to watch the video again. So fuck it, I'm just not even going to try. I'm going to leave the humor to you from now on, moving forward with your Maoism series. You can be the comedian in the Maoist scene.
Yeah. And so, to a certain extent, I did have an existential crisis when I was on my hiatus, because I'm like, look, I know what I look like. I'm this dude on the internet who has a Donkey Kong avatar talking about Marxism.
Best. I love it. And I noticed, by the way, I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but I noticed that you changed the hammer and sickle.
I did.
You got the base hamsick now.
Oh my god. So my first hamsick I drew on there in Microsoft Paint, and it looks terrible. and so I was like, I need to step it up. If I'm going to return to YouTube, I need to step up my game. And I am seeing returns from my investment.
Well,
yeah,
my
subscriber count's gone up significantly since I've been back, and I was afraid it would do the opposite.
That's great. That's fantastic to hear. I'm delighted to hear that. Yeah, we need more voices like yours getting out there and rebuilding this space as much as is possible. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but all that is to say, I did consider sort of floating the possibility of changing my name, changing my brand, sort of adopting something more serious, and uh, maybe making all of my previous videos private. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do that because that's not me. This channel started off just as a way for me to vent, honestly. I did not expect it to get as big as it got. And I certainly didn't expect to get this many subscribers. I thought that the YouTube algorithm was going to obliterate me. And, for a while there, things were very touch and go. At the very beginning of my channel, I was getting flagged left and right just by trolls and incels and all kinds of unsavory individuals. And I didn't expect my channel to survive very long at all. But I have managed to evade that sort of thing. I've managed to evade YouTube's ban hammer. And honestly, I haven't done anything worthy of getting banned by YouTube. And so, I think that my channel is going to survive. And so I'm proud of that. But all that is to say, I started this whole channel just as a way for me to vent, and it sort of turned into something bigger. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I took a step back and went on my hiatus is because I was feeling that sort of pressure. Like I was speaking to a much larger audience and I was representing an ideology that I myself didn't feel too educated in. And I think I do sort of have an inferiority complex. I do feel like I have sort of imposter syndrome. Like I could always learn more, I could always acquire more knowledge. And while that is, a healthy mentality, it can also be a paralyzing mentality because you get to a point where it's like you don't think that anything you have to say is worth saying, and you don't think that any opinion you put out there is something that people want to hear. And then you also think, well, even if I do put this opinion out there, someone else has probably said it better. And so it was sort of like this mentality coupled with just general burnout that led me to go on my hiatus. But when I was doing that, I never stopped investigating. I never stopped watching from the sidelines with popcorn in hand, watching it all unfold. And there were many, many times where I wanted to come back and give my personal opinion about things and comment on things that were happening. And I did that a little bit on Twitter, but honestly, the YouTube format's just so much better. Twitter's sort of a hellscape,
Yeah.
and I will still use my Twitter occasionally, but it's just going to be to cross promote my videos and I'll check in every now and then and see what other people are posting, but the day-to-day Twitter drama is just not really something that I think would benefit me at this point.
The discourse, as they say, yeah, fuck that. It's not worth anybody's time. No, listen, what you're pointing to, I think, is really important. Humility. Having a bit of humility is good, actually. It's fantastic. And I think that one of the comrades in the chat there has mentioned, Jose Maria, how are you getting on? Humility is good. Imposter syndrome is crippling. But look, you've got far better things to say than a lot of people who are out there doing this same shit. So I think that that's stands to your advantage. There are a lot of people out there who act like they know what they're talking about, who will put on, they'll present themselves as though they really know what they're talking about. They're authorities on this or that when, they've really just consulted a fucking Wikipedia page about 10 minutes before they started recording. And you have a far better knowledge of these issues than they do. And I think that that's always going to be beneficial. It's always going to be beneficial for people to hear these voices and have access to people who are humble enough to say, actually, I don't know that much about this, but here are my impressions so far, and take it from there, because there's nothing worse than someone acting like they know absolutely everything about everything when it's really clear and obvious that they don't. Unfortunately, there are often young people who can't quite realize and can't quite see that people are essentially talking out their arse. Many cases.
Yeah.
And especially like if you're a teenager and you see someone who's like in their 20s or 30s or something like that, you just assume that there's a perceived sense of authority there, that they know what they're talking about. They're older, they've got more experience and this and that and the other, when that's very much not the case in many cases, especially with streamers. And by the way, I want to give a little shout out again to Socialism for All, because I was so put off streaming by what I'd seen in streaming spaces and the whole clout chasing and the drama and all the nonsense. It's actually Socialism for All who started doing streams recently, and I've been listening to them, and they're really, really good. It's not getting into the bullshit. It's none of the drama. It's none of the nonsense. Really useful. Going through articles and giving really important and thoughtful analyses on various matters. So, you know, he's the reason why I'm back here today. You know, someone who's out there being a good example. You know, so thanks to S4A. Please subscribe to S4A. They definitely deserve it. And also to the 115 viewers here, make sure you're subscribing to our pal Dankey. Help boost that channel a little bit more.
Thank you. And yeah, I really do like Socialism for All. I've been watching his content for quite some time. And, you know, when I'm bored or when I'm just, you know, screwing around, I'll put on an S4A stream or I'll put on one of his audiobooks and I'll just listen to it in the background. I also listen to your content quite a bit, Comrade Paul. And, you know, I've watched and rewatched several videos, especially your video on burnout. I think you're talking about Bad Mouse on that
Oh yeah.
one. And then I've watched your video about mental health because, you know, that's very relevant to where I'm at right now. And then recently I've been rewatching your video with Premier Matthew regarding Chinese imperialism, but I don't want to open up that whole can of worms because I'm sure I'm sure we'll get some dingest in the chat who will start flaming us if I start going into that. So
yeah, we'll leave that for another day, especially when you're like, you know, if you feel like you're fairly new to MLM, as you said, it's better just to not open the controversial cans of worms just yet, until you've actually prepared adequately for these kinds of things. Just leave it aside for the moment. There's no need to jump into it, you know. We'll just hide behind no investigation, no right to speak. Of course, I do know that you have investigated, but you know, it can be better just to avoid these kinds of topics until you're fully informed and fully confident in your positions, you know.
even if I do have a right to speak, I also have a right to not speak.
Exactly. So listen, speaking of your political evolution, I wanted to ask, you know, have you had any pushback as a result of this? Are you being accused of wanting to boil all the babies?
I actually did get a commenter saying like, "Welcome to the baby boiling cult," and you know,
Jesus.
but surprisingly, I've gotten significantly less pushback than I expected. I think that a lot of people sort of listened to my video where I announced my emergence into Marxism-Leninism-Maoism, in which I basically said, like, look, I understand if people disagree. I understand if people want to like go in the comments and flame me, but at least do me the courtesy of listening to my reasons before you do that and see if they make sense to you. I'm not asking you to accept everything that I say, but at least hear me out and don't shout me down just yet. And don't disregard me just yet.
Definitely, yeah. Unfortunately, it can cause a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Again, usually based on what they've seen people say online, on Twitter, on Instagram, or whatever. You know, they saw some people like joking about that. They saw some people like joking about boiling babies because it's such a ridiculous, like, comic book villain thing. You know, like tying babies to like train tracks or something like that. And yeah, and people are just like, oh yeah, of course that's true. Of course that's true. Of course the media is telling the truth about this group. 100%. Yeah. They're wrong about Stalin. They're lying about Stalin. They're lying about Mao. But they're definitely telling the truth when it comes to the PCP. 100%. You know. But people do see like Maoists laughing and joking about these things, and they take that in earnest, and they think like, oh no, that's something that they approve of or something. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, no. Jesus fucking Christ, what are you smoking? Like, okay, we got a little super chat there. How are we getting on? The Engelsists. Great to see both of you. Message Dankey on Discord. Hope to work with you all soon. How are you getting on? Good to see you, Engelsist. Hope you're still working away, doing the good work. And yeah, I'm sure Dankey is going to get back to you fairly soon on that.
Yeah, definitely. I have not been on Discord since I've been on my hiatus. And so when I booted it up to come on this stream, I had about a bajillion updates. It was fun.
Trying to sift through them all to make this this stream call happen. We're using Discord to, because we heard that actually Discord is monitoring people now, and you know, sending all that information to the CIA and MI5, and And you know, Maoists, we're all MI5 CIA agents, so we just said, yeah, that's safe for us. That's fine. We can talk about MLM on Discord. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, speaking of which, George Soros, you have yet to send me your paycheck. So if you see this stream, please send it soon.
Yeah, he's on my Patreon, so it's fine. But he's a cheap ass. He's like a €2 patron. It's like, what the fuck are you doing, George Soros? Like £2. We know all that money you got. Come on, jump up to the €10 tier at least, will you? Fuck's sake. You Gopnik's paying me more than him. No, I literally have someone on my Patreon who actually call themselves George Soros. So yeah, that's always fun to see in the credits. Anyway, cool. Okay, so you are working on this new series, The Essentials of Maoism. Can you please tell us all a little bit about that? What you're hoping to do with that stream, what your goals are, and so on.
Yeah, so really, I didn't set out to make a series about this. I was simply writing down my thoughts in a Google document, and I was like, look, at this point, I've written about all these ideas. It's basically a script, so I might as well just narrate what I've written and make a YouTube video about it. And it's a good opportunity for me to really step up my game in terms of video production. And so I've started, messing around with editors, messing around with audio and video editing, and I know that my new videos can come across as a little rough, but I'm still learning how to do everything from a technical point of view. But I feel like since I've already got the script, all I need to do is figure out how to use these editors, and that'll only help me improve in my ability to make content. And I'm not seeking out to have an advanced series on Maoism, but I am seeking out to make just a very bare bones essential view of Maoism, discussing all of the ideas, not only specific to Maoism, but of Marxism and Marxism-Leninism as well, and then sort of find a way to relate that to our contemporary movement, especially within the United States. So I'm seeking to sort of examine what Maoism is down to its bare essentials, and then relate that to the current conditions within the United States. And towards the end of the series is when I will start giving my own personal takes on where I think we should go. And of course, this is a project that I would be more than willing to accept help and criticism on, constructive criticism, of course. And I going back to the whole humility thing, I certainly don't think that I have a encyclopedic knowledge of everything Marxism-Leninism-Maoism. I still am very much emerging into this tendency, and so this is going to be a rough take, but hopefully one that is correct, hopefully one that is comprehensive, and I am certainly open to amending and modifying and making adjustments as I go along. So, for example, in episode 3, if I start making a mistake or if I say something wrong, I might amend it. I might make it episode 3.1 and add that later on down the line, even if it's out of sequence, just so that people can have a more complete, more comprehensive view of Marxism-Leninism-Maoism.
That's a really, really good perspective. I often find that when you make a video on something, that's when you're doing the deepest study and research on the matter. You maybe before you start the video, you have an idea in your head. Okay, I want to go here, I want to go there. But it's when you're writing the script and you're really you're going through your sources and checking again and making sure that everything you're saying is perfectly accurate. And you're consulting all these different sources, and that's when you really refine your knowledge. And then oftentimes you'll release a video and you'll get a comment and it'll say, hey, have you considered this or have you considered that? And, it is a dialectical process. It is a process where you're developing as you go. And I've noticed that definitely with my Socialism 101 series, where I've made, I don't want to say I made huge mistakes earlier on. I did this or did that or whatever. But there were definitely areas where I would refine moving forwards. And I've had to correct as we moved on, with the process. So yeah, it is part of the process. It's all about developing, and part of the struggle and criticism that goes into that. It's all important, especially for MLMs.
Yeah,
Caffeine ramble.
and I think I'm pretty good at the whole self-crit thing. I am very hard on myself both online and in real life. And so I tend to think that to a certain extent, it can become paralyzing. We talked about the whole imposter syndrome thing, but I think just finding a way to sort of move past this and say, you know what, I do have, a better take than a lot of the individuals you'll encounter on this website. I'm not going to name names, but just knowing that it's like, okay, there is a correct line out there, and there are incorrect lines out there, and the incorrect lines are dominant over the correct ones, and so there needs to be some kind of counterbalance here. There needs to be some ideological pushback against the prevalence of revisionism and right opportunism and liberal opportunism that you'll see all over the internet.
Yeah, definitely. All kinds of opportunist errors, from right opportunism to left opportunism, all of them. We need to work and correct all of them. We all will fall into those, especially. And we were talking a little bit about this before the stream, especially like for people who are new to Marxism-Leninism-Maoism. There's a period of correction that you go for, because you identify all of these errors that you made historically. That I've been through this, everyone goes through this, and you often overcorrect and go into the opposite direction, and you end up throwing out the baby with the bathwater on a lot of issues. And you can take quite ultra leftist positions as a result of that. And you don't seem to be doing this at all at the moment. You seem to be you seem to be pretty balanced and keeping your head on straight at the moment. But it is something to be careful of. There are pitfalls and there are traps there, and you do need to be careful. And it is really important to stay in dialogue with people who can, engage in good faith criticism and self-criticism, and not be like a liberal about that, who takes that as a personal attack on someone's character, but understanding this as part of a collective process of arriving at the correct line together.
Right. And I don't think that anyone is going to all of a sudden reach enlightenment. I don't think that anyone is going to reach this point where it's like, aha, now I know everything about everything and I am now the authority on this issue. And so I think it is important to keep an open mind. And as long as people are giving you constructive and principled criticisms, and as long as you are open to having a dialogue with those individuals, I think that you should leave yourself the wiggle room to have your mind changed, and don't get so set in your ways. I mean, this Marxism-Leninism-Maoism is a science, and I would defend it as a science. It's a social science, but it's a science nevertheless. And part of the whole scientific process is an openness to modifying your ideas and adjusting and refining your model framework in light of new evidence. And and in the Essentials of Maoism in a future chapter, I talk about how Maoism is a science and its laboratory is the class struggle. That's where the experimentation occurs in the real world. And so, you should always be subjecting your theoretical framework to tests. You should always be seeking to disregard inaccurate models and adjust them to better reflect material reality. And of course, I would argue that Marxism-Leninism-Maoism is a much more accurate model, especially for the modern day, than traditional Marxism-Leninism.
Hard agree. I think a really, really important point there about the crucible, the laboratory of struggle. I love that. I love that. So important that things are actually tested out in practice. That we aren't just falling into subjectivism and saying, oh well, I think this is a good idea and I think that's a bad idea. And it's like, well, no. What's actually been proven to work and what's been proven not to work? Let's look at class struggle and see which one of these was effective. And that's ultimately that's where correct ideas come from that social practice, as Mel would say. So really, really important points there. Yeah, and I appreciate those.
Yeah. And I think another thing that sort of differentiates Maoism from Marxism-Leninism is that Marxism-Leninism has had its limitations tested. There have been world historical revolutions undertaken by Marxist-Leninists, the October Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, and these have sort of advanced the theoretical range of Marxism-Leninism. And to that end, Maoism has sort of recently emerged on the world stage in the late 80s, the early 90s, and so it's just now reaching its theoretical horizon. And we don't know what that horizon is going to illuminate going forward here in the future. And so I think maintaining a scientific attitude and maintaining an open mind is something that Maoists uh, must adopt by necessity going forward. We can't just carve ourselves into a little niche and say that this is how it has to be. These are the tactics we have to adopt, and this is what we have to promote going forward. And if you don't do that, you are a revisionist, you're a, you know, a LARPer, and you need to be disregarded.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely think that's a really, really good, important point. Yeah, and keeping an open mind and a scientific attitude and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And, you know, looking at the perceptual data that we have there from the class struggles, from looking at the Chinese Revolution, from all of the MLM revolutions taking place today and that have taken place, you know, for example, in Nepal and so on, and seeing what worked, what didn't work, what went right, what went wrong, and having that dialectical approach to these matters, you know. And from that, conceptualizing, getting higher levels of conceptual knowledge, that sort of ascending spiral of knowledge that we always speak about, that that Mao outlines in On Practice. You know, that's what we're trying to do here. You know, it's really, really important that it's tested in class struggle and looking at what works and what doesn't work. And it's just such a point of... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's also important not to adopt a sort of pessimism when things don't work out. For example, when the People's War in Peru fell, or when the revolution in Nepal failed, um, there were probably a lot of people out there who said, okay, Maoism is defunct. Let's not pursue this line any further. Let's not investigate this any further. Let's retreat back into movementism, or let's retreat back into this sort of revisionist Marxism-Leninism. And I feel like a similar trend happened either amid China's reform periods under Deng Xiaoping or after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. I feel like quite a bit of people within the overall Marxist movement adopted this sort of pessimistic attitude of, well, communism's impossible. We tried, it failed, and now we need to retreat back into movementism, or we need to push forward into some kind of eclectic post-Marxist, weird, idealistic, you know, new way. And you know, you arrive at all sorts of strange tendencies when you start to investigate, you know, the sort of you know, post-Marxist formations that started to pop up in the 90s after the dissolution of the USSR. There were a lot of people who adopted a lot of strange ideas that were completely divorced from dialectical and historical materialism. And earlier you said, you know, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but that's exactly what they did. They said, okay, the USSR failed. China is now, you know, in this revisionist period, and so let's just completely throw away Marxism and pursue something new. And the whole basis of that new ideological framework isn't based on dialectical and historical materialism. It's based on something else. It's based on postmodernism. It's based on just these strange, like I said, eclectic tendencies that aren't really anchored to anything that you could consider concrete material reality that you can experiment with and test on a scientific basis.
Yeah, really, really good points. And especially looking at, you know, like the failures and stuff of historical and, you know, some might say contemporary. I disagree with that, but people will point to, you know, what's going on in the Philippines and say, oh, well, it's been like 50 years. What's going on? Like, it's clearly not working. But it's like they are making concrete advances. You know, you need to look at what are their goals? What are they actually trying to do, you know? And, you know, even in Nepal, it's like Nepal, people are like, oh, it was what a massive failure Nepal was. It's like, well, in 2001, they were literally outlining what they wanted. And it's literally what they have now. It's definitely fallen short of, you know, establishing a dictatorship to proletariat, you know, moving towards socialism, that sort of way. But they were literally like, yeah, we just want to overthrow, you know, we want to overthrow the monarchy that's been there for a couple hundred years, and, you know, we want to have like a multi-party democracy. And they sort of twisted new democracy into just being like a multi-party democracy. And, you know, they were just like, okay, well, once we have a parliamentary democracy, that's pretty much it. We can just fight it out in the elections. And yeah, Prachanda, the leader, is the prime minister now of Nepal. So like that actually is what they described in 2001. I don't think people realize that is actually what they, you know, what their leadership was fighting for. There were, of course, other elements in the Nepalese leadership who were fighting for like a more of a like true and pure socialism and so on and so forth. And of course there were people who were further to the right than him. But yeah, I mean, that's literally what the leadership were saying. They actually did achieve what he had set out to do in 2001, like going all the way back to then. So yeah, so it's a weird one. It's a weird one. Nepal's a very strange and contradictory experience, you know, a lot of highs and lows in that, you know. It's not like an all-out failure. It's definitely not the win that we wanted, you know, establishing like a parliamentary democracy and moving forward that way. Better than having like an autocracy and monarchy and all of that, but it's not exactly the full socialism that people were, you know, putting their lives on the line for. And you know, of course, many people died in that revolutionary movement, and it's absolutely tragic. But at the same time, it's not the all-out failure that people think it was. You know, they achieved what they achieved, at least what the leadership was had set their goal to be.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in any movement, especially in any revolution, there are periods of advance and there are periods of consolidation. There are also periods of stagnation. There are times where there are setbacks and there are hurdles and obstacles that need to be overcame. And I think that one of the keys for a Maoist party, especially, is to maintain a mass line and never abandon that mass line, but always be striving to push forward and advance the socialist project where you can. And that's the important caveat, is where you can.
Yeah.
There are periods in time where consolidation becomes more important than advancement, but as long as the overall trajectory continues to advance, I think that's the important thing. As long as you're not going backwards, as long as you are not abandoning the socialist project and pursuing the capitalist project, I think that is the mark or the line that should delineate between a socialist project and a capitalist project.
Right, really, really good points. Brilliant. All right, I see that we're over an hour on the stream, so maybe we'll wrap things up there. We don't want to get people too tired and fatigued of watching us, and also we don't want to fatigue ourselves as well. We want to be able to do these quite regularly. In fact, I believe we were saying that we might do a part 2 of this stream over on your channel, maybe in the next week or two, or at some point anyway. So again,
yeah, sounds great.
Subscribe to Dankey if you want to check that out. Just before we wrap up there, I just want to ask as well, for other channels, I think it's really important. You know, you mentioned how it's important that channels like stick together and help each other out and boost each other. And I'm conscious that this channel now has a few people who regularly watch the videos, and you know, we've got over 100 people here at the moment. So what are some channels that you would like to shout out and to build up, whether that's they could be YouTube channels, could be podcasts, other media sources that you think people should be checking out and uplifting? So any at all. I know we've talked about, I know you did a video on this recently, but you know, if you want to give an extra boost to anyone, now's the time.
So I would be remiss if I did not mention a channel that I've been watching recently called Space Babies. Space Babies did yeah, she did a wonderful series on the Maoist period in China, and so I suggest everybody go check them out and see what kind of content they post, because I think that they're putting out some pretty awesome stuff. And of course, we also mentioned Socialism for All. Everybody should go check out Socialism for All. It's a great channel. And I've also been looking at a YouTuber called Second Thought. He has a pretty large subscriber base now, but he produces pretty excellent documentary style deep dives into generalized topics, and he does a great job of presenting Marxist ideas in a very generalized format. And so I feel like he can really reach a mass audience in that regard.
Nice guy too.
But yeah, that's about all who comes to mind. I'll definitely have to look through my subscriptions and see who else I can find out there. But yeah, as of right now, Space Babies, Socialism for All, and Second Thought are channels that I really check out and subscribe to on a regular basis.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Space is absolutely fantastic. He's also on a really good podcast called Politics in Command. And I'd also strongly recommend that if people are looking for similar principled, scientific socialist, Marxist-Leninist-Maoist analyses. And Space has been on 1 or 2 episodes of that, and it's just a phenomenal podcast. One of the best podcasts I've seen, and it's only very new as well. It's only come out, I think, in the last year or so. I was on an episode of it there a few months back, and it's just brilliant. Jay runs it, and it's great. Another channel that I really like as well, another channel that was influenced by Socialism for All. I love the name of it, Socialist Republicanism for All. It's an Irish comrade who has set up a new channel, and they're going through like James Connolly and really just looking at socialist republicanism, the Irish revolutionary movement, the application of, you know, scientific socialism to the Irish conditions, and basically doing like audiobooks in that way. So it's cool to see people being influenced in that line. I think I'm going to do a separate video, maybe like either a stream or a scripted video or something like that. Just really drawing attention to these channels because there's so many of them. Best D Marx, that's another great one. Notorious Notorious Casamang is criminally underrated. Really, really good stuff coming out of there. And then, you know, from various organizations as well, there's a lot of really important stuff coming out from, you know, national democratic stuff, great stuff coming out from like Brazil and Nova Democracia. And yeah, there's loads of great stuff. I'm gonna have to do a separate stream on that, but anyway, yeah, cool.
I can't believe I forgot about Best D Marx. That's a big one.
Yeah,
that's what happens when you go over the hour mark. My brain starts declining.
Yeah, unless you're like having a beer or something like that and just getting into it and getting to the buzz, then I think after an hour people are pretty much ready to check out, but we'll never leave. All right, there's a little bit of background noise coming through there. Apologies. Someone has a motorbike and gone by and looking very, very cool while they do it. Listen, Dankey, thanks a million for coming on. This has been a ton of fun. Let's do this again soon. I'm looking forward to picking this up over on your channel in a week or two. I want to say thanks very much to everybody who tuned in. I see people recommending a number of great YouTubers. Finball, of course, being recommended. Classic, the OG. And yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Hope you are all doing well, and I hope you have a good day and a good weekend. Dankey, do you want to say anything before we finish? Do you have any final words before we wrap this up?
Yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and uphold the revolutionary science of Marxism-Leninism-Maoism.
Hell yeah, love it. Love to hear it. All right. Cheers, everybody. Slán go fóill. All the best now.